Majo John Madden, and I am in Veracruz, Mexico, stepping out of the breeze, which I think may impair the sound quality of this video. Veracruz, Mexico. I've been in Mexico for a year, and I've been traveling for 4 years, but I'm doing a series of videos today that started with, I saw in my own calendar that this was the anniversary of George Floyd's killing 4 years ago, and then heard stories about it on National Public Radio, what's happened in the 4 years. And I was very involved in that summer of racial reckoning in the U.S. I've been in Mexico a year, but I was in the U.S. for that first year. And I want to start this video. This is about the 5th video I've made about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, and the summer of racial reckoning spilled over to the following summer. Before, I guess I'll do another video about stuff going on in Louisville and Breonna Taylor. I want to do a video just to trace my stripes as an interracial person. Why all this means so much to me, and why I feel free to call myself one of the blackest white middle-class men around. I was sure didn't start out, I wasn't printed for that. I was born in a Irish ghetto on the west side of Chicago, and my family, like the rest of the Irish, fled the west side of Chicago when the unscrupulous landlords would come around and say, "They're coming." Some of them moved into the next block. In another couple of months, your house isn't going to be worth jack. I'll give you half the value of it right now. And they took the deal. So the whites all fled the west side of Chicago. And my nuclear family went to a little blue-collar suburb southwest of Chicago called Brookfield, where there were no black people. The neighboring LaGrange was more upscale, but ironically had one little pocket of black people, one little neighborhood. But I had no contact with black people through high school, through college. Not much experience with black people. In my 20s, I got involved in something called reevaluation counseling, or peer counseling. I was being trained to be a professional psychologist at the University of Rochester, a PhD clinical psychologist. But I did my personal growth through a peer counseling organization called Reevaluation Counseling, which was pretty exceptional in that whole personal growth movement, the whole human potential movement, in that it had been founded by Harvey Jackins, who, before he became a personal growth guru, was a organizer for the Communist Party. And he was all about social change and all about justice issues. And reevaluation counseling was not a navel-gazing self-improvement organization. It had a very strong social justice commitment. And really the notion was, I can't be free until everybody's free. So we dove into issues like racial justice and gender issues and such. But I would say that my real learning process started with adopting a black son, a biracial son, and there's been a lot of controversy in the U.S. about that whole practice. We were in Nova Scotia, Canada, and the 3-province adoption agency considered Terry a hard-to-place child because he was biracial. He had been born in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is very white. And we learned actually a lot about his background. His mom was a white Irish lady, a department store manager, and his father was a biracial lawyer practicing law in St. John's. And they gave up the baby for adoption because although they really loved each other, they just couldn't see having an interracial family there in Newfoundland. And we learned that Terry's dad was biracial. His mother had been Bermudan, I think Bermuda, And the father had been a white member of the Canadian Navy or something like that. No, no, that's all wrong. No, the mother, Terry's mother was the white department store manager, Irish. Terry's father was a McGill-educated lawyer. Yeah, sorry about that. McGill-educated lawyer, really smart, and they were both really very substantial people. So that was helpful in an adoption. But between my wife and I, and this was a last-ditch attempt to save our terrible marriage, and it didn't succeed, so about a year and a half after adopting Terry, we split up. Between the two of us, I was the one who really committed myself to Terry's black identity, and this is what goes wrong in interracial adoptions, is that the white parents don't support the black identity of the kid. No, I dove into it. I got involved in something in Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago, which is the most integrated neighborhood of Chicago, 50-50, called the Biracial Family Network of Hyde Park. And I was living in Oak Park on the west side of Chicago, and we created a chapter there of the Biracial Family Network. And I immersed both of us in that. He was with me only for vacations, but he and I developed a rich collection of, mostly it was interracial marriages. I think my situation was the only adoption. So mostly it was one black parent and one white parent. And I developed a wonderful peer group of parents who were parenting a biracial kid. And he developed a wonderful peer group of biracial kids. And one of the things the savvy parents there would tell me, he was young still, probably he was 7 or 8 when we first got involved in that group. They'd say, you know, when they're young like this, it's fine for them to say, I'm brown, I'm part black and part white. But when they hit teenage years, they've got to identify black because society will. And they got to be prepared for that, and they got to claim their black identity. So I really walked that walk, and then I got involved. For several years, I worked at a very black VA hospital as a psychologist. Tough black VA hospital. And learned how to really talk straight to black guys. They had so many problems. They were dealing with poverty, racism, poor neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago or west side, both of them. And dual diagnosis. Most of those guys also had substance issues. So I got clear that any expectation we were going to cure these guys in a day hospital where they came every day for a month or two, no. I informally rewrote my job description of, I hang out and tell the truth. Hang out and tell the truth, be as much of a straight shooter as I can. And one kind of graduation for me was my boss. I was the psychologist. My boss was a black Jamaican woman, Beverly Hottie, British in her culture. And every year, as the honorary Irishman in our staff, she'd buy me a green carnation. And one year, Frank, one of my black patients there, said, what's that for? And I explained because I'm Irish. And Frank says, you're not Irish. I said, yeah, I sure am. Frank says, you can't be Irish because Irish are racist. And so he was saying, I experience you as not racist. And my commitment to my black son included really embracing hip-hop music. About the second summer he was with me, that it hadn't gone away. I was kind of hoping he'd move through that. I had to embrace it. I went deep into it. We went to all kinds of concerts. We saw some of the very great acts. And one of my kind of graduations was I was driving on the west side of Chicago and was at a stoplight next to a Latino guy and his girlfriend, and they were playing hip-hop music. And I leaned over and indicated he should roll his window down. And I said, I like this album. Too bad about his DJ being killed. And this Latino teenager says, you know, man, I have to confess, I would not have expected you to know this music. I knew a lot about hip-hop music. So I walked that walk. And that's kind of the background for talking about. I'm going to go back now to talk about Louisville, Kentucky, the summer of 21, Breonna Taylor, and the Black Lives Matter movement there.